Donald Trump and the Maga Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
People are still talking about Joe Biden's divisive speech in front of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. So Rasmussen reports asked 1,000 people about it in their latest poll. One question asked was, in his Philadelphia speech, Biden said Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? According to Rasmussen, 36% strongly agree, 12% somewhat agree, 8% somewhat disagree, and 39% strongly disagree, 5% weren't sure. Rasmussen reports also asked, quote, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Joe Biden should quit blaming MAGA Republicans and get to work on the economy he ruined. A whopping 46% strongly agree, 12 somewhat disagree, 12 somewhat agree, and 26 strongly disagree. And lastly, 4 said, yeah, I'm just not sure. Let's bring in Rasmussen Reports head pollster Mark Mitchell to break it all down for us. Welcome back, Mark. This is interesting given that clearly I keep hearing even independents I talk to saying this really bothered them. So what's the context here?
Yeah, there's a lot of context. If you look at strongly agree versus strongly disagree, 3% more people say strongly disagree. So there's fiercer, opposition to that statement. But if you add in the somewhat agree and somewhat disagree, 48% to 47% people agree that MAGA and Donald Trump represent some form of extremism. Looking at the parties, obviously you'd expect Republicans to disagree. 76% disagree, but there's still a 21% chunk of Republicans that do think that MAGA and Donald Trump are extremism. But on the flip side, looking at Democrats, 80% of Democrats agree with that statement, but 17% disagree. So there's an almost equally large chunk of Democrats that disagree about MAGA. But looking at the independents, I think, as always, you can see, where the overarching themes are. 40% of independents agree that MAGA is extremism, but 53% disagree. So that 13-point spread, it's interesting. It's pretty similar to the generic congressional ballot spread that Republicans have over Democrats among independents. But it's actually nowhere close to the spread that Biden has in his independent approval rating. So if you look at it this way, MAGA has a better approval rating among independents than Joe Biden did. Now, looking at the other demographics, often there is. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying that is an interesting way to look at it, actually. Go ahead.
So in other demographics, older voters are more likely to disagree with the statement than younger voters. They're also more likely to be much more polarized, I think partly because they're following the news closer than younger voters are. But this one stood out to me most. Black voters are less likely than Hispanic or white voters to strongly agree that Donald Trump and MAGA represent an extremist threat to the nation. That's incredible. Now, they're also less likely to say strongly disagree, but there's been so much talk about MAGA being tied to racism, and look at that number. Less than 32% of blacks strongly agree, but 35% of Hispanics and 37% of white voters. Now, it is a complicated question. So it wasn't just MAGA, it had Donald Trump in there. So the question has some aspects of a referendum of Trump. But also, there's an angle that people in America are just agreeable people, and they like agreeing with statements. But if you look back, every time we've done a Biden-Trump matchup, Trump beats Biden by at least 6 points. So, whether or not they agree with Biden on this statement, I don't think you can take too much stock with it. The Republicans still have a significant lead in the generic ballot, and Trump's still winning rematches. Now, the other statement, like I said, people like agreeing with statements, and I think they especially like agreeing with concepts of government officials getting back to work. But our nation's voters, by 58 to 38% margin, say that Biden should stop blaming Trump and get back to work. And I think some of the backdrop there is that Biden has taken more vacation than the last 4 presidents. You'd expect Republicans to agree with this. 83% agree, but 16% disagree. Independents, 55 to 38 agree. But here's the kicker: 35% of Democrats think that Biden should stop blaming, MAGA and get back to work fixing the economy. That's a pretty big number. And as you know from last week, 30% of Democrats also support impeaching Biden. So there's problems in his own party.
Yeah, there's definitely indicators of problems in his party. There's some psychology, sociology to be explored there in regards to people maybe liking to agree with statements. Thanks, Mark, with Rasmussen. We always appreciate the look at the American public.
All right, my pleasure.